picture a teenager's morning for a second. The alarm blares, usually from a phone that's been like inches from their face all night long.
Oh, yeah. The absolute worst place for it.
Right. And there's this immediate, just frantic grab for the screen. A flood of notifications hits their eyes before they've even, fully opened them.
Exactly.
Then comes the realization that they overslept. So there's a mad dash to find clean clothes, frantic scrolling while standing in the kitchen trying to just inhale a piece of toast, and bolting out the door with a baseline level of stress that is already through the roof. I mean, it is, for lack of a better term, pure chaos.
It really is. It's survival mode right from the very first second. And it's a scene playing out in, millions of homes every single day. The teenager is essentially launching into a defensive posture before their feet even hit the floor.
Which is such a brutal way to begin a day. But what if we contrast that chaotic scramble with the quiet power of the first hour after waking up? Because whether you are a parent trying to help your kid or an educator seeing the aftermath of these mornings in first period, or honestly just a lifelong learner fascinated by how the brain develops, understanding how to engineer focus during that specific morning window is, well, basically a superpower.
It's a superpower that is desperately needed, especially when you look at current attention spans. I mean, we are asking developing brains to focus in these highly distracting environments, yet we often completely ignore the biological setup required to actually achieve that focus in the first place.
Yeah, that's so true. So that is our mission for today's deep dive. We are unpacking a step-by-step mindful morning routine designed specifically for teenagers to build focus, to build resilience, and to fundamentally change how they engage with their day.
And we've got some great material to guide us.
We do. To do this, we are looking at two incredible sources. First, a comprehensive article detailing the psychology of mindful teen mornings. And second, we have the actual design specs for an interactive, highly visual teen workbook created by a brand called Playprint Pals.
Setting the tone here is crucial, though, because when most people hear morning routine for teenagers, they picture this rigid, military-style boot camp.
Right, like forced marches before dawn.
Exactly. Barking orders, zero fun. And that approach fails spectacularly with adolescents. What we are exploring today is about biology, it's about autonomy, and subtly training the brain's attention span before the school day even begins.
So let's unpack the biology part first, because before we get into the actual physical actions a teenager should take, we really need to understand the mechanism behind it. Like, why is the brain so uniquely vulnerable during this specific time of day?
Well, it comes down to the science of what psychologists call priming.
Priming.
Right. When you wake up, your brain does not instantly switch on like a light bulb. It's a gradual chemical process. It actually takes anywhere from 15 minutes to, well, over an hour to fully transition from slow-wave sleep to full alertness.
Wow, over an hour. I had no idea it took that long.
Yeah, it's a slow roll. And during this specific transitional window, the brain is highly impressionable. So whatever inputs it receives first, they basically set the cognitive and emotional baseline for the next several hours.
I used to think of the waking brain like booting up a computer, but reading through these sources, it feels more like, I don't know, like laying down train tracks just ahead of a moving train.
That's a great way to look at it.
Right. Like if the very first pieces of track you lay down are jagged and chaotic, like a social media feed filled with bad news, social drama, or, perfectly curated highlight reels, that train could run on a chaotic path all day. You're just guaranteeing a bumpy ride.
That track analogy captures the physiological reality perfectly, because you are quite literally laying down the chemical pathways for the day. There is a deeply biological component to this, and it's centered around something called the Cortisol Awakening Response, or CRR.
Now, cortisol usually gets a pretty bad rap, right? Like it's the stress hormone.
It does get a bad rap, but in the context of waking up, a cortisol spike is actually your biological engine revving.
Okay, so it's a good thing.
Yes, exactly. About 30 to 45 minutes after you wake, your body naturally spikes its cortisol levels. This is a totally healthy function. It mobilizes glucose into your bloodstream so you have the energy to tackle the day.
Got it. So where does it go wrong?
Here is where the track gets jagged, to use your analogy. If you take that natural, healthy metabolic spike and you add a stressful external stimulus like an alarming headline, a rush exit, or an argument, you hijack that healthy spike.
Oh, yikes.
Yeah, it mutates into a lingering stress spiral. The body interprets the cortisol not as time to wake up, but as we're under attack.
Wow. So the engine just redlines before you even leave the driveway.
Precisely.
And I have to say, looking at the source material, this is where the Playprint Pals workbook really shines. They have this science corner slide, and it visualizes this biology beautifully for a teen.
Yeah, they do a great job at that.
They really do. They don't use dense, boring textbook paragraphs. They use a simple, friendly infographic mapping the cortisol curve. It visually demonstrates what smooths that curve things, like natural light and breathing, versus what spikes it into a panic state, like notifications and rushing. I mean, it makes an inevitable biological process completely visible.
Showing the mechanics is vital, but understanding the biology only gets us halfway there.
Right, because teenagers.
Exactly. For a teenager to actually adopt these habits, we have to navigate the minefield of developmental psychology. We have to answer the real question. Why would a teenager willingly subject themselves to a structured morning?
Because if you just hand a teenager a workbook and say, hey, I read about this great morning routine, you're doing this now, the sheer force of the eye roll might just knock you over.
It's guaranteed to backfire completely. And this brings us to the fundamental drive of adolescence, the desperate need for autonomy.
Autonomy.
Right. Adolescence is entirely about identity construction. They are constantly trying to answer the question, who am I becoming?
So if you force them to do it.
If a routine is imposed by a parent or a school, it's just another chore. It's something being done to them. But a ritual acts entirely differently.
Okay, wait. I have to push back a little here.
Sure, go ahead.
I hear the words routine and ritual thrown around a lot in wellness spaces. Is there a tangible difference, or are we just using fancy vocabulary to make teens feel sophisticated about, brushing their teeth?
That's a fair question. The difference is entirely about intention. It's about where the attention is directed. Brushing your teeth on autopilot while staring blankly at the mirror is mechanical. That's a routine. Taking a moment to consciously focus on your breath or pausing for gratitude requires active mental participation. That makes it a ritual.
So it's about being present.
Exactly. It might only take 3 minutes, but it functions as an act of self-authorship. It's a pocket of the day that belongs entirely to the team. It's not performative for their peers, and it's not being graded by a teacher.
And by doing this consistently, they are quietly building a self-image as someone who values calm. That internal identity shift is infinitely more powerful than a parent delivering like an hour-long lecture about the benefits of mindfulness.
Identity formation happens through repetition. It has to be lived, not told.
Right, lived, not told. I love that. So with the biological necessity of that first hour and the psychological buy-in established, let's look at how this actually plays out in practice. The sources outline a 20-minute blueprint broken down into 6 interconnected steps.
Let's get into it.
Step 1 starts by grounding the physical body, specifically by addressing the elephant in the room, the smartphone.
Waking without the phone is the linchpin of the entire practice. For the first 15 to 30 minutes, the device must remain physically out of sight and out of reach. The teen wakes up and simply checks in with their physical body without judgment.
The physical distance of the phone is the critical mechanism here. Keeping a smartphone on the nightstand is like sleeping next to a glowing slot machine.
That is the perfect way to describe it.
And when you are half asleep, your prefrontal cortex, the logical, disciplined part of your brain, isn't fully online yet. You cannot rely on willpower to ignore a slot machine when you're groggy. You have to remove the physical temptation entirely by charging it across the room.
You have to engineer the environment for success, because if the phone is out of reach, the default action shifts from scrolling to simply being present.
And the way the Playprint Pals workbook handles this is incredibly smart. They don't frame it as a punishment or a strict no screens lecture, which doesn't work.
No, not at all.
Instead, they have a 7-day checkbox tracker, specifically labeled Days I Didn't Touch My Phone in the First 15 Minutes. It gamifies the friction, It turns the absence of the phone into a micro-challenge.
It's brilliant. And once they've successfully navigated those first few minutes without a screen, the body still needs biological cues to fully wake up. This brings us to step 2, light and movement.
Ah, yes. Light.
Opening the curtains, stepping onto a porch, or just sitting near a bright window for 5 minutes.
Because natural light hitting the retina is what actually halts the brain's production of melatonin. Right. the sleep hormone.
Yes, exactly.
It regulates the circadian rhythm
Yeah.
far better than an espresso shot.
Much better. And you pair that light exposure with a simple 3-move stretch. We aren't talking about a high-intensity workout here.
Right, no burpees before dawn.
Thankfully, no. It's just a physical signal. It's a
Yeah.
gentle mechanical prompt to the muscles and joints that it's time to transition from rest to activity.
Okay, so as that body wakes up and that natural cortisol spike we discussed starts to build, step 3 introduces the core anchor to keep it from spiraling, which is conscious breathing.
Yes, the breathing.
This takes about 3 to 5 minutes, and the sources emphasize a highly specific pattern. You inhale for 4 counts, hold for 4 counts, and exhale for 6 counts. What is the mechanism behind that specific ratio? Like, why the longer exhale?
Extending the exhale is a biological hack. When you exhale longer than you inhale, the diaphragm moves in a way that stimulates the vagus nerve.
The vagus nerve.
Right, and that nerve sends a direct signal to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the body's natural rest and digest mechanism.
Oh, I see.
It physically slows the heart rate. It acts as a literal brake pedal for that cortisol spike, ensuring the engine revs smoothly instead of redlining.
To help visualize this, the Playprint Pals workbook uses this large, calming, expanding and contracting circular guide on the page. As you breathe, you follow the shape. And they render it in their signature brand colors, these beautiful muted shades of warm coral, deep teal, and golden yellow.
It's very soothing visually.
It really is. It takes a conceptual idea like mindful breathing
Yeah.
and turns it into a tangible visual tool.
It grounds the physical body beautifully. So once the nervous system is calibrated through light and breath, the blueprint shifts. Step 4 moves from preparing the body to preparing the mind for the day's tasks.
And this transition starts with 3 to 5 minutes of intention setting.
Yes.
Instead of leaping out of bed and making a stressful mental to-do list of, homework and chores, the teen asks a different kind of question. How do I want to feel today? Or what is one thing that actually matters to me today?
Shifting the focus from a checklist of tasks to the quality of attention is profound. It dictates the emotional tone of how those daily tasks will actually be experienced.
Now, this is where the concept is brilliant, but the execution could easily fall apart, in my opinion.
How so?
Well, I can see a teen reading set an intention and just dismissing it as cheesy therapy speak. Teenagers have zero tolerance for things that feel contrived, clinical, or, overly earnest. How do we get them to actually write this down?
You're totally right. Tone is everything here. If the workbook feels like school homework or a psychological intake form, they'll reject it immediately.
Right.
Playprint Pals navigates this by making it a warm, low-pressure journal prompt accompanied by a small compass icon.
A compass instead of a map or a checklist. I love the subtlety of that.
Yeah, a compass implies setting a bearing. It's about direction, not perfection. If you have a map and you take a wrong turn, you've failed. You're off the route.
Yeah.
But if you have a compass, you just reorient and keep going. It gives the teen permission to simply aim for a feeling rather than demanding flawless execution of a plan.
So the mind's compass is set, the body is awake, but the engine still needs actual fuel. Which brings us to step 5. And this is a part of the morning where a teenager's default habits usually sabotage the focus we just spent 15 minutes building.
Breakfast?
Breakfast. The blueprint calls for 10 to 15 minutes of nourishment without distraction, meaning eating without a screen in front of their face.
This is perhaps the most stealthy cognitive training in the entire routine. In modern teenage life, the ability to give full, undivided attention to a single thing at a time is an incredibly rare skill.
So true.
When a teen eats breakfast while scrolling through short-form videos, they are coupling a basic survival reward food with an intense, high dopamine novelty reward from the phone.
They're essentially training their brain to expect maximum stimulation at all times.
Precisely. So decoupling those two things, eating without scrolling, is an exercise in single tasking. It forces the brain to tolerate a lower stimulation environment. You might feel uncomfortable or boring at first, but sitting with that minor discomfort is exactly what trains the brain to sustain attention on the present moment.
It's an attention workout disguised as eating a bowl of cereal. I love that.
It really is.
And once breakfast is done, before they walk out the door into the absolute chaos of the school day, the routine calls for step 6, a final 2-minute anchor. Writing down a gratitude or reflection note. Just one small appreciation.
The mechanism at play here is countering the brain's negativity bias. Evolutionarily, our brains are like Velcro for negative experiences and Teflon for positive ones, because remembering threats kept our ancestors alive.
Well, that makes sense.
By forcing the brain to scan the environment for one positive thing every single morning, you begin to rewire that bias. Furthermore, when a teenager looks back at a notebook filled with weeks of these small notes, they see a visible physical record of their own resilience. They see evidence that even during, say, stressful exam weeks, there were moments of good.
Okay, so we've covered the complete sequence. Waking without the phone to avoid the slot machine trap. Getting natural light to halt melatonin. Using 4-4-6 breathing to hit the parasympathetic brake pedal. Setting a compass bearing for intention. Single tasking through breakfast. And logging a point of gratitude.
That's the six-step blueprint.
It sounds incredibly healthy, but let's talk about the actual return on investment here. How does this 20-minute sequence tangibly solve the modern problem of a fractured teenage attention span?
The ROI becomes clear when we look at how neuroscience and behavior intersect. And it starts with the concept of digital residue.
Digital residue, what's that?
Well, when a teen begins their day with rapid-fire dopamine hits from social feeds, they alter their brain's baseline stimulation threshold for the rest of the day.
So their brain's expectation for entertainment gets artificially inflated right out of the gate.
Yes, so an hour later, when they sit down in a classroom and have to read a textbook, which is a fundamentally slow, low-stimulation activity, it feels unbearably painful.
Because they're used to the fast pace.
Exactly. Their brain is starved for the rapid pacing it experienced at 7 a.m. The mindful morning routine prevents this inflated baseline. By prioritizing biological calm over digital dopamine in that critical first hour, the brain remains calibrated to engage with slower, sustained, difficult tasks.
It also loops back to the cortisol response and stress load we discussed earlier. A stressed brain is quite literally a distracted brain.
Yes, because when background stress is high, say, because a morning was chaotic, the amygdala, which is the brain's threat detection center, stays active. It constantly scans the environment for danger.
Wow.
And this threat scanning consumes massive amounts of cognitive bandwidth. If you lower that background stress through breathing and mindful intention, you shut off the alarm system. That frees up all that cognitive bandwidth to be used for actual learning and complex problem solving.
Which brings us to the physical structure of the brain itself, specifically the prefrontal cortex. This is the region responsible for executive function, planning, impulse control, and focus. And in teenagers, this area is basically an active construction zone, right? It's still maturing.
It is, which is why this routine is so crucial for them. Every single time a teen sits down for that 3-minute conscious breathing exercise, their mind will inevitably wander. They'll think about a test or a friend or, what to wear.
Sure, that's natural.
Right. But the magic happens the moment they notice the wandering and actively choose to pull their attention back to the breath.
So every time they pull it back, it's a literal rep for the prefrontal cortex.
It is a bicep curl for the brain's focus mechanism. They are physically thickening the neural pathways responsible for attentional control. And the most important point emphasized across all our sources is the compounding effect of these reps.
Because the goal isn't a flawless, unbroken streak of perfect mornings.
Right.
If they miss a day or they rush through it because they genuinely overslept, it's not a failure, it's just reality.
Exactly. The Playprint Pals workbook supports this perfectly with their full-page 7-day tracker. It uses a game-like grid that rewards returning to the practice rather than punishing a missed day.
That's so much better for teens.
It encourages forgiving consistency because a 5-minute daily practice of attention control compounds into dozens of hours of neurological training over the course of a school year. It transforms a teenager from someone who occasionally tries hard to pay attention into someone who has systematically built the neurological capacity to focus effortlessly.
That is a staggering distinction, truly. We started this deep dive looking at the biological reality of that vulnerable first hour. We mapped out how laying down the right tracks, removing the phone, seeking light, regulating the vagus nerve with breath, setting a compass bearing, single tasking through breakfast, and cataloging gratitude keeps the morning train running smoothly.
It really sets them up for success.
It does. We've seen how avoiding that early digital dopamine spike and lowering background stress physically frees up the prefrontal cortex to do its job.
And for listeners who find themselves wanting to understand the deeper mechanics of these concepts, our sources highlighted 3 exceptional books.
Oh yes, let's share those.
First is The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. It provides a fascinating look into habit loops and how to intentionally engineer your environment to reshape them.
A foundational read for anyone interested in behavioral change.
Absolutely. Then there is Wherever You Go, There You Are by John Kabat-Zinn. This explores the deeper philosophy and practical mechanics behind breath practice and mindfulness. Finally, The Whole Brain Child by Daniel J. Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson is essential reading for anyone wanting to grasp how the developing adolescent brain actually processes stress, emotion, and attention.
Phenomenal recommendations. We've spent this time exploring how a 20-minute sequence can rewire a developing teenager's brain, pulling them out of that chaotic survival mode and giving them a foundation of quiet power.
It's life-changing stuff.
But, it does leave us with a question to turn back on ourselves.
Yeah.
Because neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to adapt and rewire, doesn't stop when you turn 20.
Very true.
So whatever your age, I want you to ask yourself,
Oh.
what unseen cognitive residue are your current morning habits leaving on your own attention span for the rest of the day?